there will come a time in your life when you will be confronted by something or someone that rattles your sense of safety, of sanity, of moral structure. You'll meet individuals who operate with such twisted logic, such deceptive charm, such dangerous intent, that you start to question the very fabric of what is right and what is real. These aren't simply difficult people. They're not just mean or negative. They are manipulative. They are deeply deceptive. They are predatory in their psychology. These are the evil, the toxic, the narcissistic minds that cloak their destruction under a mask of charisma, which are of the grandeur of smallness, victimhood, or authority. They do not come at you with horns and fire. No, they come smiling. They come with compliments. They come saying, I'm here to help. One of the most unsettling truths you'll ever come to terms with is this: evil doesn't always show up looking like a villain. In fact, it rarely does. Evil is not usually loud. It's not always violent. It doesn't announce itself with thunder and lightning. It walks quietly. It smiles. It adapts. It studies you, and then it strikes not with brute force, but with slow psychological erosion. This is something most people don't want to believe. Why? Because it's far more comforting to think that bad people are easy to spot. We want to believe that toxic, destructive personalities are obvious, that they yell, they cheat, they lash out. But more often than not, the truly dangerous individuals are subtle, strategic, charming. You see, charm is their currency. It's how they buy your trust. And here's the terrifying part: they're good at it. They know what you want to hear. They mirror your values. They ask the right questions. They create a sense of intimacy quickly. And that's not an accident, it's a tactic. Because before they can control you, they must first disarm you. If they came at you with rage on day one, you'd back away. But if they come to you with empathy, with shared trauma, with stories that make you feel seen, you let your guard down. You open the door. And that's all they need. This is particularly dangerous for people who are compassionate by nature. If you're someone who sees the good in others, who believes in second chances, who leads with understanding, then you're exactly who they look for. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong in a way they can exploit. Your empathy is a doorway they'll gladly walk through. The most sinister manipulation doesn't happen in one big event. It happens in micro moments, small lies, subtle blame, passive-aggressive digs, masked jokes, taught, what? And each time you explain it away. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. They're just going through a hard time. They didn't mean it like that. But over time, this does something dangerous. It rewrites your reality. You stop trusting your gut. You start rationalizing their behavior. You even begin to blame yourself for the discomfort you feel. And that's how they win out through force, but through confusion. You won't see it as abuse. You'll see it as a relationship that you just need to work harder at. That's the trap, And it's one that smart, self-aware, kind-hearted people fall into all the time, Now, let's be clear, this isn't about paranoia. Not everyone who is charming is dangerous. But when someone's charm is used as a tool to distort, control, or gaslight, you need to stop romanticizing it and start recognizing it. Because this is how narcissistic and manipulative people operate. They are not interested in mutual growth. They're interested in control, in winning, in shaping the narrative so that you play the role that serves their story. It's not a relationship. It's a stage. And you've been cast in it. So what do? You learn to see charm not as a green flag, but as a neutral trait, something to observe, not to blindly trust. You pay attention to consistent sidos, their behavior match their words when no one's watching. Do they apologize without flipping the blame? Do they respect your boundaries without making you feel guilty? Because real character isn't built on first impressions. It's built over time. Evil, on the other hand, thrives in speed. It wants to sweep you off your feet before you have time to plant them firmly on the ground. That's why slowing down is one of the most powerful defenses you have. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to assume the worst in everyone. But you must stop rushing into closeness before clarity. You must learn to trust patterns, not promises, energy, not empty words, and your own intuition, especially when it whispers something's off, even if you can't quite explain it yet. Because when evil, toxic, or narcissistic minds cross your path, you owe it to yourself to notice the signs before the damage is done. You owe it to your peace to pause, to ask questions, to be cautious without being cold, to be aware without being afraid. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And in a world where charm can be weaponized, your discernment is your shield. There's a peculiar and dangerous form of manipulation that often gets mistaken for love or worse, a concern. And it's this: control disguised as care. It's subtle, almost poetic in its deception. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand loudly. It whispers. It cloaks itself in the language of affection. It says, I'm just trying to help you. It says, I worry about you because I care. But what it's really doing is rearranging your freedom to fit someone else's comfort. Now, this is difficult to identify. Why? Because the words sound good. They echo the sentiments we associate with kindness. They seem nurturing, protective even, but underneath the surface, the intention is not to support your independence, it's to erode it, to chip away at your autonomy decision by decision until your life starts to look more like their vision than your own. This is common behavior in narcissistic dynamics. The narcissist doesn't want a partner, a friend, or a peer. They want a reflection, a projection of their own control. They want a version of you that doesn't disrupt their ego. And so instead of issuing orders like a tyrant, they frame their control as guidance. Instead of punishing you outright, they create guilt. If you loved me, you'd listen. I just don't want you to make a mistake. You'll regret it if you don't do it my way. This kind of manipulation can be so refined that you don't even notice it at first. In fact, you might even feel lucky to have someone who seems so involved. So attentive, but soon, decisions that were once yours, what to wear, who to talk to, how to spend your time become decisions you feel the need to explain, to defend, to justify. And let me be clear, that's not care. That's control. You see, true care doesn't restrict, it respects. It makes room for your individuality, even when it doesn't agree. Real love allows space. It doesn't suffocate. And if someone is only supportive when you conform, that's not support, that's submission. A client once told me something that stuck. I didn't notice I was being controlled because it didn't look like anger, it looked like attention. And that's how these toxic dynamics survive. Not by aggression, but by confusion. Not by force, but by emotional leverage. You end up believing that you are the one being difficult, that maybe you should be more agreeable, that maybe your independence is selfish. And slowly, the walls close in. The key to untangling this is to watch for the pattern note, the one-time comments. World in now one, but the repeated conditioning that makes you second-guess your instincts. If someone consistently positions their preferences as morally superior, if they weaponize guilt to steer your behavior, if they measure your loyalty by how often you agree with them, that's not a relationship, it's a power dynamic, right? And this doesn't just apply to romantic partners. It can be parents, friends, anyone who uses care as a currency for control. People like this often paint themselves as the martyr. I've done everything for you, while slowly rewriting your narrative so that you feel like the ungrateful one. It's manipulative altruism, and it's not loving. It's strategic. The antidote? Boundaries are not walls. They are the rules of engagement. They're how you teach others to treat you, not with hostility, but with self-respect. When you say, I appreciate your input, but this is my choice. And someone reacts with anger or guilt, that's not a healthy reaction. That's a signal that their care was conditional, that it was never about your well-being, it was about control. You need to listen to those moments, because the people who truly care about you may offer advice, may express concern, but they will never punish your independence. They will never tie their love to your compliance. So the next time someone says, I'm doing this for your own good, pause. Ask yourself, does this feel like care? Or does it feel like coercion? Is this person expanding my freedom? Or are they slowly replacing it with their own preferences? Because here's the truth. Evil doesn't always wear a scowl. Toxicity doesn't always raise its voice. Narcissism doesn't always wek Applause. Sometimes it pretends to nurture. It mimics concern. It wraps its control in a warm blanket of, I'm only saying this because I love you. And if you don't see it for what it is, you will find yourself shrinking your life to keep someone else comfortable in theirs. And that, slowly but surely, is how freedom dies. There is no violence more insidious than the slow erosion of self-trust. You don't feel it all at once. It doesn't come like a crash or a collapse. It's a quiet thing, drip by drip, day by day, and by the time you notice, the foundation is already rotting. Your voice feels small. Your instincts feel suspicious. Your décision, always second guessed. Now, why does this matter? Because your ability to trust yourself is the very mechanism by which you navigate the world. It is the compass that helps you distinguish right from wrong, safe from unsafe, true from false. When that compass is broken, you're not just confused, you're vulnerable. This is exactly what toxic and narcissistic individuals exploit. They don't always attack you head-on. That would be too obvious. Instead, they target your reality. They chip away at your certainty. They introduce just enough doubt to make you question whether your perception can be trusted at all. They say things like, are you sure that's how it happened? You're overreacting. No one else sees it that way. You're being too sensitive. I think you're just tired. And slowly, you stop defending yourself. Not because you believe them entirely, but because you don't believe yourself anymore. This is what we call gaslighting. And it's one of the most potent psychological tools of the toxic mind. It doesn't just distort facts, it rewrites your identity. It makes you unsure of what you saw, what you felt, even who you are. And once that doubt takes root, they don't need to control you directly. You'll do it to yourself. You'll apologize when you've done nothing wrong. You'll stay silent to avoid conflict. You'll walk on eggshells just to keep the peace. You'll stop making choices without first imagining their disapproval. And here's the real tragedy. You'll call this keeping the relationship healthy. Let's be very clear, this isn't health. This is survival. And relationships built on survival are not relationships. They're prisons with invisible bars. The narcissist knows exactly how to use your empathy against you. They study your emotional patterns like a map. They find your pressure points, your fear of conflict, your desire to be understood, your need to be seen as kind, and they push again and again until standing up for yourself feels like betrayal, until saying no feels selfish. But here's what you must understand. Your instincts are not the enemy. In fact, they are your oldest ally. They are the accumulated wisdom of every moment you've survived, every danger you've sensed, every time you knew something was wrong-jeven when you couldn't prove it. If you feel something is off, it usually is. If someone consistently makes you feel confused, guilty, or lesser after interacting with them, that is not a coincidence. That is a message from your nervous system. And ignoring that message doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you lost. One of the greatest recoveries a person can make is the recovery of their own voice, their inner knowing, their ability to say, this doesn't feel right to me, and then act accordingly without needing anyone else to validate it. And I'll tell you something else, regaining that trust in yourself, it's not easy. It requires patience. It requires unlearning the programming that told you your feelings were too much, your memory was flawed, your instincts were wrong. It requires rebuilding the bridge between your experience and your confidence brick by brick. But it's possible. I've seen it happen. I've seen people who were shells of themselves, vis-confused, withdrawn, full of self-doubt, stand up, speak out, and reclaim their identity. I've seen women who couldn't order food without checking their partner's eyes first become leaders. I've seen men who were belittled for showing emotion learn to trust their own hearts again. You don't need permission to trust yourself. You don't need proof. What you need is the courage to begin listening at Ganeto, that quiet voice inside you that has been whispering all along, something isn't right. When evil, toxic, and narcissistic minds cross your path, their greatest weapon is not their anger, it's their ability to make you mistrust your own. But you are not powerless. You are not broken. And your intuition, though buried, is still alive. Dig it out. Dust it off. Begin again. Because the moment you start trusting yourself again, you start becoming dangerusto then. At some point, you have to make a choice, not a loud, dramatic declaration, but a quiet, resolute decision. I will no longer allow this presence to infect my peace. Let me be perfectly clear. You are not obligated to keep harmful people in your life in, no matter how long they've known you, no matter what role they play, no matter what guilt they try to hang over your shoulders like a shroud. There is a difference between compassion and self-destruction. One gives life, the other drains it. And when you encounter an evil, toxic, or narcissistic mind, one of the most radical and courageous acts you can take is not to fight them, not to fix them, but to create strategic distance. Why strategic? Because we're not talking about running away in fear. This is not about cowardice. It's about clarity. It's not about cutting ties in bitterness. It's about building space with intention. Space that allows you to see clearly, to breathe deeply, to think freely. Because when you're too close to the fire, you don't just feel the heat, you lose your vision in the smoke. Distance is not the absence of love. Sometimes it's the proof of it love for your sanity, your stability, your soul. Let me give you something practical here. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. If someone consistently manipulates your emotions, drains your energy, minimizes your accomplishments, invalidates your experiences, or twists your words, should they be seated in the inner circle of your mind. There's this cultural lie that tells us family is everything, or blood is thicker than water, or forgiveness means access. No, that's how people stay in prison. That's how toxic cycles continue, generation after generation. You have a duty not just to your own mental health, but to the people watching you, your children, your friends, your younger self too. Draw a line in the sand. And here's the truth. Drawing boundaries is often met with rage by those who benefited from you having none. But that doesn't mean you stop. The narcissist will call you selfish. The manipulator will act like the victim. The toxic mind will launch a campaign to convince everyone else that you are the problem. But that's part of the test, because the more you try to protect your space, the more they will try to invade it. That's when you double down. You see, distance is data. When you step back, you get to observe without the emotional fog. You start to see patterns that were once disguised by charm. You begin to notice how much better you feel when they're not around, how your chest isn't tight, your thoughts aren't scrambled, your joy isn't dimmed. And you learn something else too. Peace is addictive. Once you taste it, you begin to understand what you've been missing all along. You stop chasing closure. You stop explaining yourself. You stop shrinking to fit into places you've outgrown. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. Sometimes the absence of chaos feels unfamiliar. Sometimes you feel guilty for feeling better. Sometimes loneliness creeps in and makes you question your choice. But here's what I tell my patients. And here's what I'll tell you. Temporary discomfort is the price of long-term alignment. You must ask yourself, do I want short-term approval or long-term peace? Do I want to be liked by everyone or loved deeply by a few who see me clearly? Do I want to spend the rest of my life translating my worth to people who are committed to misunderstanding me? Or am I ready to stop explaining and start evolving? The greatest revenge is not anger. It's not proving them wrong. It's not even confronting them with some clever speech. The greatest revenge is peace. It's flourishing. It's freedom. It's being so deeply anchored in who you are that no amount of gaslighting, guilt-tripping, or manipulation can shake your foundation. That is the power of strategic distance. You don't need to slam the door. Sometimes you just stop opening it. You don't need to light the bridge on fire. Sometimes you just stop crossing it. You don't have to hate them. You just have to choose you. And when you do, everything starts to change. Because the moment you reclaim your space, you reclaim yourself.